The palace of the Vampire King rose like a black mountain against the silver moon. Its spires reached toward the sky, sharp as daggers, and the walls were carved with centuries of history, tales of battles, betrayals, and blood. Within the cold, echoing halls, silence reigned, broken only by the soft steps of servants moving like shadows along the marble floors. Elara, the youngest maid of the palace, hurried through the corridors, her heart pounding as if it would leap from her chest. She clutched a small satchel tightly. Inside, which was a fragment of her courage and a plea for help she feared no one would answer. Her face was pale under the torchlight, but her eyes burned with determination. Something terrible had happened. Her little sister, Leora, had been taken. She reached the grand chamber at the heart of the palace. The door was tall, black, and adorned with silver carvings of wolves and moons. Inside sat the Vampire King, Kale, on a throne of obsidian, as still and silent as the night itself. His red eyes, usually calm and unreadable, flared as he looked up, sensing the urgency in Elara's approach. "They took my sister," Elara said, her voice trembling, yet steady enough to demand attention. "Please, you must help me." Kale's gaze sharpened. Red light flickered in his eyes like fire. For centuries, he had ruled without question or challenge. Yet something in the human's tone stirred him a mixture of fear, desperation, and courage that no vampire could ignore. "Show me where," Kale said, his voice low, resonant, and dangerous. Even the shadows in the room seemed to shrink away from it. Elara's hand shook as she pointed toward the dark forests beyond the palace walls, where twisted trees clawed at the sky and mist curled like restless spirits. The rogue wraiths. They took her. I followed them, but I couldn't reach her alone. They're not like anything I've ever seen. Kale rose from his throne, his movements fluid and predatory. The moonlight caught his pale skin and long dark hair, making him look both terrifying and impossibly beautiful. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, and yet, something in him was different tonight. There was a warmth, a flicker of something long buried beneath centuries of rule and solitude. "I will find her," Kale said. "No one takes what is mine, or what you hold dear." "One," Elara swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. The words should have terrified her. The Vampire King, feared by all, had spoken, but instead, they brought a strange comfort. Even in the presence of such power, she felt that perhaps there was hope. They moved through the palace together, Elara guiding Kale to the edge of the human lands where the forest began. The air grew colder as they approached, carrying the scent of decay and smoke. The trees were tall and twisted, black bark scarred with ancient runes. Shadows danced and stretched like living things, and the wind whispered in voices almost human, almost cruel. Kale paused at the edge, letting his gaze sweep over the forest. "They are clever," he murmured, "but cleverness cannot hide weakness. And they have made a mistake in taking your sister." Elara shivered, though whether it was from the cold or the intensity in his eyes, she could not tell. I just want her safe. I don't care about the cost. Please, Kale, we can't fail." He looked at her, truly looked, and something in his eyes softened. Centuries of ruling with iron and shadow had taught him cruelty, but centuries of solitude had taught him loneliness. And tonight, the sight of this small, determined human stirred emotions he had long thought dead. "Stay close," he said, voice a mix of warning and command. "And trust me, even if your heart fears the darkness ahead, the first step into the forest was like crossing into another world." Mist clung to their ankles, and the ground seemed alive, pulsing with unseen energy. Strange sounds echoed between the trees, the snap of a branch, a whispering laugh, the soft rustle of movement, but no eyes watched them openly. Elara noticed Kale's movements were deliberate, careful, and deadly. Every shadow he passed seemed to bend away, and his senses stretched far beyond hers. He was aware of everything, every creature, every rustle of wind, every heartbeat. And yet, even with such power, he allowed her to stay by his side. They followed the faint traces left by the wraiths, ash on the ground, scorch marks on bark, a whispering trail of despair. Elara clutched Kale's sleeve when a shadow flickered close. The creature that emerged was thin, its body almost mist, and its eyes glowed with cruel intent. It hissed like a living knife. Kale moved without hesitation. His hands were lightning, his strength unimaginable. In a heartbeat, the wraith shrieked, torn apart, leaving only a curl of smoke. Elara gasped, her hand pressed to her mouth, but Kale's eyes never left the path ahead. "Stay focused," he said softly, almost as if speaking to her heart as much as to her mind. "Fear is a tool, not a master. Remember that." As they delved deeper, the forest seemed to grow angry. Trees leaned toward them, roots twisted to form barriers, and the mist thickened into a wall of silver that obscured vision. Every step became a challenge. Elara began to feel her courage falter, but Kale's presence steadied her. Even in his silence, there was a reassurance she could feel, a pulse of warmth amid the cold night. Hours passed, and they finally heard it. A soft cry. Delicate, yet unmistakable. Leora. Her voice carried over the mist like a fragile bell. Elara's heart leapt, and she ran toward it, Kale following closely, silent as a shadow. But the forest had one last trick. The ground beneath Elara gave way, and she fell into darkness. Kale's roar shattered the air, a sound that seemed to bend the very forest. He dove after her, catching her with inhuman speed, his strength pulling her back to solid ground. Elara trembled, clinging to him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Kale held her for a moment longer than necessary, his red eyes glowing in the darkness, reflecting not just power but concern. "You are reckless," he said, voice low, almost a growl, but there was no anger. Only a warning wrapped in care. "I couldn't wait," she whispered. "She's all I have. I can't lose her." Kale's jaw tightened. "No one will take her from you. No one will take anything from me while I still draw breath." They pressed on, deeper into the heart of the cursed forest, following the cries of Leora and the trail of the rogue wraiths. The trees grew taller, the shadows darker, and the whispers louder. Elara felt her courage faltering, but Kale's presence, fierce and unwavering, kept her moving forward. Then, just as they reached a clearing shrouded in black mist, the air shifted. The mist thickened, forming shapes, hands, faces, impossible forms that reached out as if trying to pull them into the shadows. Leora's voice echoed again, but this time it was faint, distant. Elara took a step forward, and suddenly, the ground beneath her vanished. She screamed, a sharp, human sound that broke the night. Kale's hands were lightning, catching her just as she fell. He held her close, lifting her effortlessly, his red eyes blazing like twin fires in the mist. "They play cruel games," he said, voice low and dangerous. "But I will not be fooled. Show me where they hide her, or I will tear this forest apart until I find her." Elara looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw not just a king, but a being capable of care, of anger, of fierce protection. Her heart pounded not only with fear but with a strange, new hope. Then, from the shadows, a whisper floated on the wind, a voice cold and cruel, familiar yet terrifying. "You cannot save her. Not without cost." Kale's red eyes narrowed. "I will pay any cost," he said, voice like steel and fire. "Do you hear me? Any cost." The mist shifted, forming shapes that laughed like children, cried like mothers, and hissed like snakes. Leora's cries were closer now, more urgent. But the forest was alive with traps, illusions, and deceit. Elara clung to Kale, heart trembling, mind spinning with fear and hope. Kale's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, not restraining, but steadying. In the face of impossible darkness, in a forest that breathed shadow and whispered death, a bond was forming. Between human and vampire, between courage and power, between the desperate and the unyielding. And as the first shadow moved to strike again, Kale's eyes blazed, and he whispered, "Stay close, Elara, and do not let go. I will find her. I promise." The forest seemed to pulse around them, alive and watching, as the cries of Leora echoed through the mist. And somewhere deep in the darkness, the rogue wraiths waited, smiling, knowing that the true test had only just begun. The forest beyond the palace was no longer just trees and mist. It had become a living labyrinth, twisting and shifting. With every step Kael and Elara took, shadows lengthened, bending into impossible shapes, and whispers floated in the air, carrying promises and threats alike. The rogue wraiths had ensnared the land with their dark magic, turning the path into a maze designed to break courage and will. Elara's steps were cautious. Her small hands trembled as she brushed against blackened bark, feeling as though the trees themselves were watching. Every rustle of leaves, every sigh of wind, seemed to carry danger. Kale walked beside her, silent, his presence both terrifying and comforting. His red eyes glowed faintly in the mist, scanning every movement. "Do you feel it?" Elara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The forest. It's alive." Kale's jaw tightened. "It is not alive," he said slowly. "It is a mirror. It shows your fears, your doubts, your secrets, and it feeds on them." Elara swallowed. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel safe in his presence. And yet, she could not ignore the creeping terror that clawed at her heart. The labyrinth was not only physical, it was a test. A trap designed to twist the mind. They moved forward cautiously. Mist rose in curling waves, parting to reveal broken paths and tangled roots. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision. And sometimes, just sometimes, Elara thought she saw Leora, only for the image to vanish like smoke. Kale paused at a fork in the path. One route descended into a valley of thick mist, where the ground appeared wet and treacherous. The other climbed a ridge lined with jagged rocks, black as coal. "The wraiths want us divided," Kale murmured. "Fear will pull us apart, if we let it. Choose wisely." Elara hesitated, her gaze flicking between the two paths. "Finally," she said, "the ridge. We can see farther from above. Maybe we can spot her." Kale nodded. "Then, we go." As they climbed, the forest seemed to resist them. Roots snaked across the path like living snakes. Mist thickened, chilling them to the bone. Every step became a test of endurance. Elara stumbled once, and Kale's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with strength that could have crushed bone but instead steadied her. "You are not fragile," he said softly, almost to himself. "You are stronger than you know." Elara felt her cheeks flush. Not from the climb, but from the intensity in his words. There was something about the way he looked at her, fierce yet gentle, that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, the fear in the forest faded, replaced by a strange, fragile hope, but the forest was relentless. As they reached the top of the ridge, a wave of cold washed over them, and shapes began to form in the mist. Figures taller than men, thin and twisted, their eyes glowing with a cruel red light. The rogue wraiths had found them. Kale stepped forward. Every movement, precise and predatory. "Do not come closer," he warned. The wraiths laughed, a sound like cracking ice, and surged forward. Elara's heart pounded. She wanted to run, but Kale's presence was a shield. He moved like shadow and flame, striking with inhuman speed. His hands and fangs were deadly, yet controlled, a perfect balance of power and purpose. The wraiths fell, one by one, their forms dissipating into smoke. "Stay behind me," Kale ordered. Alara nodded, gripping her small satchel tightly. She could feel the magic in the air, a pulse that seemed to respond to her fear and determination. And then, instinctively, she raised her hands. A faint glow appeared, soft and warm, and the closest wraiths recoiled, hissing as if burned by invisible fire. Kale glanced at her, surprised. "You have power." I don't know how," Alara admitted. "I just wanted to protect her." Kale's expression softened, though the red in his eyes never dimmed. "It is enough," he said. "Sometimes, courage is the strongest magic of all." They pressed forward, following the trail of whispers that led deeper into the labyrinth. The mist grew thicker, wrapping around them like a living cloak. Every sound was amplified: the snap of a branch, the whisper of wind, the distant cries of Leora. Alara's heart ached at each call, knowing her sister was close, yet just out of reach. Suddenly, the path opened into a clearing. And there, in the center, was a tower of black stone, curling upward like a twisted finger. Leora was visible, held within a cage of shadow and mist. She cried out, and Alara ran toward her. But the ground shifted, forming a chasm that cut her path. Kale's eyes blazed. With a single leap, he crossed the chasm, landing between Alara and the cage. The wraiths that guarded the tower surged forward, but he was a storm, moving faster than thought, his strength and speed unmatched. Alara's glow flared again, and this time, it extended, pushing back the wraiths, giving Kale a clear path to the tower. She gasped at the realization her fear, her love, her determination had power. Somehow, she had become a part of the fight. Inside the tower, Leora huddled, shivering. The cage pulsed with dark energy, feeding on fear and despair. Kale approached, his hands brushing the mist that formed the cage. Red energy met his touch, and a low growl rumbled in the air. He was not just fighting the wraiths, he was battling the magic that bound Leora. "Alara," he said, voice strained. "This is dangerous. Stay back." Alara hesitated, but then she realized she could help. She raised her hands, channeling her fear and hope, and a warm light spread outward, touching the edges of the cage. The dark energy hissed, recoiling, and the cage cracked. Kale's eyes met hers, and in that moment, a bond was sealed, a connection of trust, power, and unspoken emotion. Together, human courage and vampire strength broke the cage, freeing Leora. She ran into Alara's arms, sobbing, and Alara held her tightly, whispering words of comfort. But the relief was short-lived. The Wraith Queen, taller and darker than any Kale had faced, emerged from the mist. Her eyes glowed with cruel intelligence, and her smile was a blade. "You are brave," she said, her voice echoing in the clearing. "But bravery alone will not save you. One must always choose, and the cost is never small." Kale stepped forward, blocking the path to the sisters. "Leave them," he commanded, "or face the consequences." The Wraith Queen laughed, a sound that chilled even Kale. "You think you can protect them? You cannot save both. And you cannot save yourself from the darkness within." Alara tightened her grip on Leora. Fear surged through her, but she saw Kale's face, calm, yet burning with intensity. She knew that he would fight, that he would not allow anything to take them. And yet, the Queen's words planted a seed of doubt. Kale's red eyes flared. "I will pay any cost," he said, voice like iron. "You will not harm them." The Wraith Queen's smile widened. "Then let the final trial begin." Mist and shadow surged, and the world seemed to twist around them. The ground trembled, trees bending into impossible angles, and the air shimmered with dark energy. Leora cried out, clutching Alara, and the sisters huddled together as the Wraith Queen advanced. Kale stepped in front of them, his body a shield, his presence radiating strength and command. Alara felt her heart hammer not just from fear, but from the undeniable intensity of his gaze, the promise of protection, and the unspoken bond forming between them. "You are not alone," he whispered, though his voice carried to the Wraith Queen. The Wraith Queen paused, as if weighing something unseen. Her eyes flicked to Alara, recognizing the glow, the courage, the spark of something powerful and human. And then she vanished, melting into the mist, leaving behind only a chilling echo. "You cannot save them both. Choose, or lose everything." Alara's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Kale, whose eyes burned brighter than the moon above. She felt fear, hope, and a strange, overwhelming pull toward him, a connection that neither of them could name, but both felt. Kyle reached for her hand. "Stay close," he said, his voice a low promise. "We will face what comes. Together." Alara nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Leora pressed against her side, still trembling, but safe for the moment. The forest pulsed around them, alive with shadows and whispers, waiting for the next move. And in the heart of the labyrinth, something watched a shadow with cunning and patience, knowing that the true test was only just beginning. The heart of the Wraith Labyrinth was darker than night itself. Mist swirled like living smoke, and twisted shapes of trees reached out as if trying to trap intruders forever. At the center rose a tower of black stone, taller than anything in the forest. Its walls pulsed with dark energy, and a faint, eerie glow surrounded it. Inside, the rogue wraiths had gathered their strength, waiting for Kale and Alara to step into the final trial. Kyle's red eyes scanned the clearing. He could feel the power of the Wraith Queen radiating from the tower, a darkness older than any human or vampire. He flexed his hands, feeling the pulse of his own strength and the raw energy of his immortality. Beside him, Alara held her sister Leora close. Her small glow, born of fear and courage, had grown stronger since the battle in the ridge. Together, they formed a fragile, yet unbroken line against the darkness. "The wraiths. They will test us," Kale said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "Not just my strength, but our hearts. And Alara, yours as well." Alara nodded. "I am ready. We have to save her and end this." Kale's gaze softened for the briefest moment. "Then we go. Together." They stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the tower's courtyard. The ground was cracked, black mist seeping from the fissures, twisting into shapes of monsters and shadows. The Wraith Queen emerged from the center, taller, darker, more terrifying than ever. Her eyes glowed like coals, and her smile was sharp, cruel, and knowing. "You are brave," she said, her voice echoing through the clearing like a cold wind. "But bravery alone cannot protect those you love. You must choose, and one must always suffer." Kale stepped in front of Alara and Leora, his red eyes blazing. "I will not let you harm them. I will pay any cost." The Wraith Queen laughed, a sound like ice cracking across a frozen lake. "Then, face the truth, King. Only one path leads to victory. Only one heart can survive unbroken." Alara tightened her grip on Leora. Her pulse raced with fear, but she could also feel a strange strength coursing through her. The glow in her hands expanded, pushing back the shadows, a tangible light, born of courage and hope. Kale's gaze met hers. "Do not let fear control you," he said. "Courage is our greatest weapon." The wraiths attacked. Shadows became solid, twisting into forms with clawed hands and glowing eyes. Kale moved like a storm, faster than thought, his strength unmatched. He struck with precision, tearing through the wraiths. Yet he did not kill carelessly. Every move, every strike, was controlled, a dance of power and protection. Elara joined in, her glow flaring brighter with each step forward. She raised her hands, and the light formed a barrier around them, a shield that burned the edges of the wraith's shadows. The rogue spirits hissed, recoiling from her courage. Together, human and vampire, they fought. Shadows fell, shrieking and dissipating into mist. Kale's movements were deadly, precise, and yet, he always shielded the sisters. Every step he took, he ensured they were safe. Finally, Kale and Elara reached the center of the courtyard, where Leora was still trembling but unharmed. The Wraith Queen floated above them, her power concentrated, a storm of shadow and hatred. "You cannot defeat me with mere strength," she said, her voice echoing like thunder. "Mercy is weakness. Compassion is a chain." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Mercy is not weakness. It is the truest strength." The Wraith Queen sneered. "Then show me, King. Show me if your heart is strong enough to protect them without losing yourself." Kale took a deep breath, feeling the centuries of darkness within him. The cruelty, the isolation, the endless nights of solitude. He felt the weight of power and the burden of immortality pressing on him. Yet beside him were the two humans he had sworn to protect. Ilara's courage shone brighter than the shadows, and Leora's innocence reminded him why he fought at all. He reached out, not to strike, but to touch the dark energy binding the wraiths. Red light flared from his eyes, meeting the shadows. Elara joined him, her glow intertwining with his strength. Together, their combined force created a ripple of light and warmth that cut through the darkness. The Wraith Queen screamed, a sound that shook the forest. Her power faltered as the light pushed back the shadows. The twisted forms that had attacked them crumbled into mist, disappearing. The tower trembled, and the courtyard seemed to breathe for the first time in centuries, freed from the weight of darkness. Ilara's glow dimmed as the last shadow fell. She turned to Kale, her heart pounding, and whispered, We did it." Kale's chest rose and fell rapidly, though his composure never broke. He looked at the sisters, then at the fading mist, and a rare smile touched his lips. "Yes," he said softly, "and it was not strength alone. It was courage and heart." Leora ran to Elara, hugging her tightly. "I was so scared," she said. Elara smiled through tears, holding her sister close. "I told you. We would find you." Kale watched them, a strange feeling twisting in his chest, something he had thought impossible, a tenderness that mingled with desire, respect, and admiration. He had spent centuries as a ruler feared and obeyed. The Wraith Queen, now reduced to a faint shadow, hovered in the mist one last time. Her voice was a whisper. "You may have won, but darkness never dies, and the choices you make will shape more than your fates." Kale's eyes blazed red once more, but this time with resolve rather than anger. "I will face it," he said. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Elara stepped closer to him, her hand brushing his sleeve. A spark of connection passed between them, unspoken yet undeniable. The bond of shared trials, courage, and compassion had created something neither expected, but both felt. The mist lifted slowly, revealing the forest around them in the soft light of dawn. The shadows that had once seemed alive now lay dormant, and the twisted trees appeared less threatening, more like guardians of a realm that had been cleansed by bravery and heart. Kael knelt beside Ilara and Leora. "You are safe now," he said, his voice softer, almost human. "But remember, courage and heart are the greatest weapons, stronger than any blade or fang." Ilara looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and something more, a connection that could not be named yet. A bond forged in trials, fear, and protection. "Thank you, Kael, for everything." He reached out and lightly touched her hand, a gesture of promise. "No, thank you. You reminded me that even in darkness, light can exist, and that, even I, am not beyond it." For a moment, silence settled over the clearing. Birds began to sing, and the first rays of sunlight touched the mist, turning it to silver. The forest seemed to breathe, alive and free, as if acknowledging the end of the trial. Kael stood, tall and commanding once again, but something had changed. His eyes, though still red, held warmth. The vampire king, who had once been feared and isolated, had learned something new. That mercy, courage, and human heart could transform even the darkest of beings. Ilara and Leora followed him through the clearing, stepping toward the palace that awaited them beyond the forest. The journey back was quieter, yet heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ilara glanced at Kael, sensing the depth of change within him. And Kael, in turn, looked at the two sisters, feeling a bond that was eternal, even if unspoken. Before they reached the edge of the forest, Kael paused. The mist swirled once more, and a faint shadow lingered at the tree line, the Wraith Queen. Watching, waiting. Kael's eyes flared, and he whispered, "This is not over. Darkness may never die, but we will be ready." Ilara held Leora's hand, then her own touched Kael's sleeve, a silent acknowledgement of what they had shared. "We will face it together," she said softly. Kael's lips curved into the faintest smile, and for a moment, the legend of the Vampire King softened into something almost human. "Yes," he said, "together." As the sun rose over the palace, casting light on obsidian walls and crimson spires, Kael led the sisters home. The forest behind them was quiet, but the shadows that lingered were no longer threats. They were reminders of trials faced, courage earned, and hearts transformed. And in the quiet, under the dawn, a new chapter began, one where darkness and light, power and heart, vampire and human, stood together against the unknown.